And I came out the next morning and almost all of the Echinacea plants were completely black. Like the leaves had turned completely.
Hey guys, today we wanted to just take a minute to talk about some of the ways that we have learned to learn from our mistakes or learn from our failures in gardening. So we have been gardening for going on 5 years now, and the style of gardening that we do is just very experimental. We're just always trying new things. That's like one of the things we really love about it, is just trying to learn and try out new techniques. And we started a bunch of perennials from seeds this year, and Cassidy will talk about that a little bit later. I'm trying to get some like Korean natural farming stuff down and just learn the techniques this year. But the point is, every year we've tried so much new stuff, and kind of because of that, we experience a lot of failure. Technically, it's just our projects don't work out a lot of the time. We've experienced a lot of crops in the past that have just been destroyed by pests overnight or in a couple days. We've experienced putting plants in the ground and they just don't grow. Then the soil is super compact. We just didn't know to not put a plant in the ground without kind of working it a little bit or allowing there some time for the tilth to return. So we wanted to just talk about some of those things that we learned. And I guess specifically we want to talk about the mindsets that we've developed that has kept us going for, like I said, into our 5th year of gardening after having made mistake after mistake. And into this year, we want to talk about some of the mistakes that we made this season. And maybe there's someone out there who really needs to hear this. Maybe they just had something really hard happen and they need a little bit of encouragement or just a mindset, because gardening is kind of curveball after curveball. Sometimes it works and you think you got it. Sometimes it just doesn't work.
So this video is all about mistakes we made this season. This season, we started so many plants from seed. We probably started close to 2,000 plants from seed, and that was spread over 3 gardens. So it wasn't all just for our garden. We did 2 gardens basically from scratch, 0 plants to probably 500 plus plants each. And then we had our plants here, plus we had all the seeds that we started that just didn't make it. So when you add that all up, it's probably close to a 2,000 number. So I made a video in probably late April, and I said in the video, this is the year of Echinacea, because we literally started probably over 100 Echinacea plants, and they were coming up and they were beautiful and they're healthy and they're doing great. And I filmed that video and I said, this is the year of Echinacea. And then that day I had this great idea to mulch them because we were going out of town and I didn't want them to dry out. And so I was like, oh, I'll just mulch them with this bag of grass clippings. Well, the bag of grass clippings had been sitting there for like a week. And what happens when you leave grass clippings out for a week is it starts to turn into fertilizer. And so I took these grass clippings and I put them directly on to my Echinacea plants and some yarrow as well. And I came out the next morning and almost all of the Echinacea plants were completely black. Like the leaves had turned completely. It was the most devastating experience. I think I was in kind of a moody mood for probably a solid 3 days after this. It was hours and hours of work starting 100 Echinacea plants and babying them along, checking on them, watering them, moving them around, giving them sun, just hours in those like 100 Echinacea plants. And I just basically wiped them all out. And I think the hardest part about it was just my mistake. Like it wasn't a pest. It wasn't bad compost. It was just purely 100% my mistake. And I think those mistakes are the hardest in the garden, when it's not nature or pests or anything. It's nothing that you can control. You literally are the one that destroyed your own work. That is so rough. That was probably the biggest mistake I made this season. a certain point, I just had to like essentially just forgive myself and move on and be like, this isn't the worst thing ever. Basically went into my garden plans. I moved some stuff around. We just didn't have as many Echinacea plants, and it's fine. I had a bunch I'd started winter sowing that I didn't put the grass around, so I was able to salvage the plans a little bit, and we still have Echinacea in all 3 gardens, but that was disappointing. I think another thing I've done this year when I've experienced these kinds of setbacks and mistakes is instead of just giving up, I've just started more seed. So I just literally today and yesterday planted probably another 60 or so Echinacea from seed. It's a little bit later in the season, but Echinacea are perennial, so as long as they have enough time to establish their root systems and I mulch them really well, they'll make it through to next season and bloom. I won't get a bloom probably this season, but I could expect a bloom next season. I'm just going to keep going, keep trying. Another plant that we almost every single year we've struggled with is cucumber and basil. And I don't think we've ever gotten a successful harvest from either of those. I don't know why that is. Basil is in the family with lavender and mint and all those types of plants, and I have this year struggled with that family, with bee balm, hyssop, agastache, basil, lavender. I have struggled with that family for sure, and I'm not sure why that is, like what about that family is so tricky, but with the cucumber, is it just our climate or weather? Is there some sort of illness in the soil that the plant gets, like some sort of bacteria in the soil? We're not sure.
Yeah. Well, and I'll even hop in and say cucumber and basil are just 2 plants that it's just frustrating that we can't seem to grow them because everyone that we know grows them just fine.
Yeah.
Like my parents will grow their cucumber plants without trying. And everyone that we've learned from says like, oh, cucumbers and basil, they want to grow. You don't have to worry about that. Like start them, you know.
Yeah.
We picked a single little cucumber that was just a joke kind of fruit because then the plant died. It was just like a little
It was its last effort. It put all its energy into that one cucumber, but literally the stalk was drying out. Dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know what it is, what we're doing. It's very confusing and frustrating. And you know what we did is we started another tray of basil and we started another tray of cucumbers. And it is getting later in the season, but you know what? I think if you still have seed in your packet, you might as well try. We're going to try again, see if we can get it to work this time. I mean, the confusing thing about the basil and the cucumber is they germinated, great germination rates. They looked healthy in the soil blocks. It wasn't until we put them in the ground.
Keep going. You know, just try it again.
Yep.
And it's not the end of the world. I mean, it is frustrating in the moment, but one of these days we're going to get it. I'm guessing that one of these days it'll work out, or one of these seasons. And so we're not just throwing away the whole season for cucumbers, throwing away the whole season for basil this year. We're just starting more, and we'll get a later harvest. It'll be fine. Another thing that I'm working on right now that I've been trying to work on for a long time, I mentioned this in one of our last videos, is our IMO, our Indigenous Microorganisms Stage 3 cultivation. IMO 1, which is just the collection process, took me like 4 tries to get. And finally, I think I got something that was pretty decent, so far as I know. So then we preserved it into IMO 2 with brown sugar, and we'll have videos coming out on all that goes in more in depth on this. But you preserve it in brown sugar, and then you take just a tiny scoop of that and you basically inoculate a pile of a carbohydrate and a carbon, which in this case what I'm using is wheat bran, some dried leaves, and some wood chips. And that pile will become your IMO 3. This is a Korean natural farming technique, and the literature out there is sparse. There is some, for sure. And then there's just a lot of teachers out there who kind of think they know what they're doing. One of the main teachers that I have really learned a lot from is Chris Trump. He's from Hawaii, and he tours all over the world teaching these techniques. I made this pile of IMO 3, and it started heating up, which is great. I'm like, okay, I guess the microorganisms are working. It's only like a foot tall, but it was heating up. It heated up to maybe just under 120, the first day. The second day, it heated up right to 120. And then past that, it just heated up more to like around 140. I had thought that I had kind of heard, I maybe had in my head somewhere that we wanted it between the 110 to 120 range, but then I looked it up somewhere and it said 140 to 160 is totally fine. So I was like, great, okay, I'll just keep turning it and it'll do its thing. But then today I literally I was listening to a podcast, just a random semi-obscure podcast with Chris Trump on there, and he's talking about IMO 3. And he literally says, he goes, guys, I can't stress enough how important it is that you keep your IMO 3 pile below 120 degrees. 120 degrees is perfect, and then below that, but nothing above it. And then he's like, if it goes up for a little bit above 120, like if it goes up to 125 for 30 minutes, you'll be fine. Just turn it, cool it down. But if it goes for like a couple hours, then this other bacteria starts to really establish, and you know, you can grow stuff with it. It's not like bad, but it's not going to have the biodiversity, and you just need really that 110 to 120 range. And I'm just listening to this, I'm like, why is this so complicated and specific? Because how do I have control over if my pile heats up more or not? You know, yesterday it heated up through the night, and I would have missed it. So anyway, point being, I think in the past, I would have just said, and I have said stuff like, forget it, I'm moving on. I'm not going to try this again. It just doesn't work, or it doesn't work for me. And that mindset, it's tempting. It's really tempting to go into that. Woe is me. I'm just going to do things that I can succeed at, sort of thing. And there's maybe a place for that. You don't want to just constantly be discouraged, and then you'll maybe be forced to give up altogether. But my mindset now is really just like, you know, I tried it. I got this far. I mean, worst case scenario, I've got to, and I'm not really out much. I can just make another pile. Try it again. And I think this time I might even try just with a different material. I've seen a lot of people use different materials, oats, even someone, foraged for nuts in the mountains near their farm. So there's just so much else that I can try, and I'm just going to give it another try. And we'll see if it works the second time, or maybe the third time, or the fourth time.
So something we have to just live through is it's our first year in this garden, and the soil conditions are terrible. No drainage, clay. I mean, it's so bad. There's not a whole lot we can do quickly, and that's okay. Unless we just did all raised beds, but we don't have the money to build that many raised beds that we need. So we're just going to focus on the soil. For the future, one thing that we have noticed is that we have a row of squash, and they're like this beautiful dark green, and then the next row is like this light green. And you can tell if a plant's nitrogen levels by the color of green it is. I've been watching my sunflowers and zinnias and been like, oh, they've been getting really pale. So I'll go out and I'll fertilize them. And I just put grass clippings around them because there's such low nitrogen in the soil. Apparently, all of our plants are just getting this super light green. Every once in a while, you see a beautiful dark green plant. You're like, well, that was a good spot. Or maybe we just have more wool in that soil block, and so it's slow release nitrogen. It's helping that plant out. It's just been interesting. This season, we're holding all of our plants' hands and helping them limp along for sure. And that's a little distressing, especially when I've started florets, brand new zinnias that are $20 a pack. It's a little distressing when you got those out there and you're like, they're at the mercy of the slugs and the low nitrogen. Yay! I think you just have to kind of let it go a little bit and be like, I'm working with nature. And some gardeners, I think their tendency is to do everything that they can to control nature and keep nature out of the process. And that's a style of gardening. Totally, you can do that. But we're more on the side of, hey, how can we cooperate with nature, bring in biodiversity, and actually live in the ups and downs that nature brings? It's embracing it as a process and not having your identity wrapped up in it for sure. Because, we can literally have an army of slugs infest our yard and everything's gone. So you just have to hold it all with open hands, I think, and enjoy the process, not just the end product, or else you're just going to be really sad when they all get eaten, or they all, I don't know. It hasn't been very warm here. It's usually very hot here, and it's been pretty cold. And I planted so many zinnias expecting heat and thinking they love it here, and they just haven't. And so that's been hard too.
Yeah.
So we're just kind of at the mercy of nature.
And that doesn't mean that, like, what we're not saying is that there's nothing you can do to cooperate with nature. There's nothing you can do to prevent or keep pests away or grow healthy plants. It's just completely out of your hands. Not at all, because we've learned a lot from having our plants destroyed by various things or not growing. Okay, how do we cooperate with nature? How do we make it work? And then it eventually, we have figured out a lot of those paths.
Next season is going to be so different. The first season in your garden, you just need to have really low expectations and a lot of grace for yourself, a lot of grace for your yard, and just like celebrate every plant that you do get to harvest, every flower you get to cut, every vegetable you get to eat. Just celebrate it and be like, wow, look, I got something out of this yard. Like, if you get anything, it's a win for your first season in a new garden.
So, Cassidy, what would you say to someone who maybe they just had their cabbages, they were starting to grow, but they came out the next morning and they were just mowed down, slugs took them out, or they experienced some other kind of failure that was either their mistake or out of their hands?
I'd just say it's okay to be sad. We're not very good in America, at least, experiencing sadness, so I just encourage you, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to feel like, dang, I put a lot of work into that, because you probably did. You know, when I lost the Echinacea, it's like we're talking about hours of my labor. And so I think it's okay to be sad and be kind of bummed out that day because you had hope and your hope wasn't fulfilled. Experience the sadness. It's okay. But then I think, like, once, you know, that sadness has moved on, I think, you know, you just need to pick yourself back up and you try something new. There's lots of veggies that you can succession plant. You'll still have a harvest even if you plant them in June. So, you know, like things like radishes, lettuce, depending where you're at with the hot season. But, you know, there are veggies that you can plant right now and get a harvest. There's flowers you can plant right now and get a harvest. If you don't have any more seeds, just go over to like your closest grocery store and pick up another packet. You could do a cover crop, you know, if you can't really get anything else in that area. Cover crop it, and next season it'll be even healthier. So I think there's a lot you can do if you pick yourself back up and think creatively and try something different. Every time you make an identity statement about yourself, like I hear people say all the time, don't have a green thumb, I kill plants, I'm not a gardener, I just kill everything I touch. And I mean, I used to say that about myself as well. And it was a friend who encouraged me to get my first plant. It was a geranium. I still have that geranium. I have continue to grow it, and it represents for me that was my first plant and I kept it alive, and it just took that one plant to convince me that I could have more plants, and it's just grown from there. Just be careful about your identity statements about who you are, and be careful how you label yourself, because I think that what you speak out in words becomes reality. And so if you say things that are like, I can't do this, I suck at this, I'm giving up, then yeah, that will be true, most likely. But if you say, man, dang it, slugs, I want to try again. What about you? What would you say to someone?
Yeah, I think I would say you should absolutely experience the emotions, like what Cassidy said about that. Hey, that felt bad. But also don't miss the opportunity to ask yourself a lot of questions. Just ask yourself, like, just as a baseline, what did I learn from this? Did I learn anything? Is there something that some takeaway? For Cassidy put the rotten grass clippings on her Echinacea. She could confidently say, I learned to not put decomposing grass clippings on my starts. It'll turn them black, or at least very well could. If you had anything going wrong in your garden, you could just ask yourself, okay, is there something that I could learn? Could I search online about how to find a solution and then try that? There's just so many ways that we can learn. You know, you could read a book about plants. You could look up another YouTube video with your specific problem, you know, and trying to answer your question. don't miss the opportunity to learn something from it, because the failures can be a tremendous gift. They can just be part of the process of learning, and you really do learn more. It's a super cliche, but you learn so much more from your failures than you do your successes. And the main thing you learn is resilience. You have the opportunity to keep going and trying again. So that would be my encouragement. If you're out there, someone is watching this, and you experienced a hard loss and you're ready to throw in the towel, don't do it. I mean, you can do whatever you need to do, but try something again, try more. Try something else, maybe move to a different plant so you can get a win for this season, or just try the plant that you messed up. Or if your compost isn't heating up, try, smell it, give it a smell. Is it anaerobic, or does it smell putrid? Maybe you need to add in some more carbon or aerate it and whatnot. We have a video on compost troubleshooting, which is why I mentioned that. But if you're trying to make indigenous microorganisms stage 3 and it keeps heating up past 120, try again. Try with something else. Try making your pile less humid or moist or whatever, or try flipping it more often, aerating it. There's just so much that we can do to just keep going. And I think that in the end, we've experienced that really pays off. We actually eventually will get the garden that we really want. It does start to work. It takes some time, especially if you're starting a brand new garden, but it will work eventually. And so we're just not going to be discouraged by the things that happened so far this year.
Yeah.
And we'll keep going.
Our cabbages look beautiful.
Our cabbages are dynamite. Oh, so good. Yeah, it's working.
They're also in the raised beds. So.
Yeah. This was helpful. I really hope there was someone who just needed to hear this today. And if that was you, you can give this video a like and definitely subscribe to our channel. Would you just even drop a comment and let us know if this encouraged you in any way? Or maybe you could let us know a question that you have about do you have any answers for this problem that I keep facing? Or this is the second year in a row that this plant hasn't worked for me. Who knows? Maybe we or someone else perusing the comment section will have an answer. Hope this was encouraging, and thank you for watching.